Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future Space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guest today is Octave de Gaulle. In 2015, Octave co-founded Spade Agency, a design firm aspiring to find ideal forms that would allow us to really live in space, not just survive. Their first client was the champagne company G.H Mumm. In September of 2018, after 3 years of research, including several zero-G flights, Octave and his team unveiled their first creation, Mumm Grand Cordon Stellar, a bottle of champagne for space, set to be served on privately owned space exploration company Axiom Space. The project was awarded several design prizes and is currently under further development with the French space agency CNES. Octave is a permanent member of the Space Habitat Technical Committee at the International Astronautical Federation. Octave, welcome back to the Future Space.
Thank you, Daniel.
So the last time we just had the normal Future Space conversation. We went through your three words that capture the essence of space, your 3 words of wisdom. We talked about exploration. I think that even your 3 words were exploration, exploration, and exploration. But then we ended up, because the conversation was so fascinating, we kind of left it without really talking about the champagne, the process, the research, the discoveries, the experience, right? The human experience of champagne in zero gravity and what it took and where it's going from now. And so I want to go to the champagne bottle. I want to go how it was born, how it was designed, everything.
Okay.
So the Mumm champagne bottle for space.
Yeah, so the champagne bottle is it's actually the sequel of my graduation project, which was how to drink a glass of wine in space. And that was kind of an experiment on how do you deal with cultural objects, artifacts, goods, that have more to take in account than just their functionality. And what happened is I presented that work in 2015 in Bordeaux, where they were very fond of the project, considering their attachment to wine. And G.H Mumm, so the Maison Mumm, came to find me and say, "Oh, how about replicating this kind of project with champagne?" And it was a crazy encounter for me because what was supposed to be an experimental project, also rooted in a political vision, I would say, of space, so that space is not only the realm of technicalities, but is also a platform to talk about what matters for humans and how we can actually envision humanity when we leave Earth, and when we leave everything behind. And so this glass of wine was a way to say we cannot just survive. And if we want to bring our culture, there are ways to do it. And those ways, I, as a designer, but many others are, as designers, know those ways and they can contribute. And it's not only about engineering. And that was pretty much the message that I wanted to convey. And it was, well, it had me go very deep into technicalities, actually. I had to catch up with a lot of things I wasn't trained to. But I ended up doing an experiment in zero gravity with Jean-François, the French astronaut, who sort of noticed the project and helped me build an experiment and actually flew it himself to see if it was working, my wine bottle. And from that point on, the Maison Mumm came, and I must say, not because I'm working for them for all these years now, but also because it is kind of unique in a brand perspective to go to a young designer like I was into a very experimental project like this was, with no real guarantee of results, with project timings that are very long, that are way over what a brand is used to do. Usually they like to brief and get results in couple of weeks, couple of months, and they came to me and I was very honest. I said, okay, if we want to go fly Champagne to space, there are a lot of technicalities that we are going to have to solve. There are a lot of things I don't know how to do and we will have to experiment. And we will need to find partners and we will need to find physical, cultural solutions, a lot of things. So I pointed out the uncertainty of the endeavor, and they said, "Yeah, well, we're game. We want to try that. Take as long as you want, and if it's stalling a little too long, we will cancel the project. But you have a you have you have room to experiment, And they gave me that opportunity, and I'm forever grateful because otherwise my project would have stayed a graduation project, and now it's an even bigger platform to talk about what matters to me in exploring further and how I think we creative people can contribute to that. In not only I'm not talking about decoration. I'm talking about fundamental ways of living, things you can witness in pretty much every museum about the evolution of our species is that creativity brings a layer of humanity that is very typical and very necessary to our survival. And so going back to the Champagne project, basically I had to rethink everything. So we had to rethink everything because back then I was already settling the basis of my agency, and that for a couple of reasons. The everything we had done with wine was about how capillary can move the liquid inside the shape, and that is because it is key to be able to move the liquid from inside the bottle to outside the bottle, for example, or for a point where you can see it to a point where it's stored. And that is because you want to be able to serve. So one of the key features is you want to be able to serve, because if you don't serve, then it's pre-packed. If it's pre-packed, then you don't share. And if you don't share, then you're more into the language, the physical language of a medicine, of a drug, than of a cultural good, One key aspect of wine is that we share, and that we don't divide it into precisely equal parts, because then, specifically when talking with alcohol, you find yourself in the language of a drug, It's then how much you ingest that becomes the key feature, and not how much you share with the others. So we wanted to be able to displace the liquid, to be able to control the liquid, and this we do very easily on Earth because we pour. So we just tilt the bottle, and the liquid goes with the help of gravity from the bottle to the glass. And I was using capillary mechanics, like physics, So basically, using a specific shape, I was able to attract the liquid at the neck of the bottle, if I may say, because it's a round bottle, and this had to be completely rethought because champagne is a pressurized liquid. Obviously, it contains CO2 that is dissolved in it, and that will be a mess if you want to try to control the liquid as a still liquid. And what we did is that we thought, okay, let's try to take advantage of that situation. So because we are going to fight that overpressure, and that's going to be a pain in terms of specs, in terms of what we need to respect in terms of safety specs, then let's try to take advantage of this. So we used in the current design of that bottle of champagne, we used that overpressure a bit like you would use it in a spray can, So you have an overpressure vessel, we call it in NASA language. So it's a pressure vessel, and we use that overpressure to control the liquid. So that was the first thing. I'm talking about this in 5 minutes, and it took 3 years to get there, more or less, with all the testing and making sure that's the right way. But then we were able to achieve what was key, which is sharing, because, as I mentioned, sharing is the center part of that experience, of that ritual. You want to be able to share. Then you want your nose to be part of the experience. And that we know because if we look at how the glass, the wine glasses look, you know, throughout history and how they've evolved, they are bigger and bigger right now. You know, you can see sometimes one that are almost ridiculous where you could pour an entire bottle in it. But the shape of it and the surface that you have, the surface of wine that is the reason why they are so big, they are key to release the aromas and drive them through your nose. So we know that the nose is actually a big part of the experience. And how do you drink pretty much every liquid in space right now? Throughout a straw, you know. So basically, the current way of drinking, the current solution that we have to drink liquids safely is through a straw, and that would be a shame with wine, you know. And typically, when I say wine, champagne is a wine, you know. Sometimes we divide a little bit, but actually, when you look at the complexity, the aromas, the qualities of the wine, everything, champagnes are often great wines, actually, you know. And so we had to share the liquid, the quantity of liquid, and then try to find a way that the nose is involved in the tasting. And for that, we chose not to imprison the liquid, but in fact to release it inside the habitat and to catch it with a specific tool, which pretty much looks like a golf tee in a little bit bigger, but it looks like a golf tee and gives you the same ability that a wine glass gives you on Earth. It gives you the ability to look at the wine, to control it, to put it in your mouth, to actually clink glasses with your neighbor. So this is all, this perpetuates very well the ritual, you know. But if you want to be able to release liquid and to catch it, you have to release that liquid very safely. And this is where we are fine-tuning in the last couple of years, and that took quite a lot of testing. And the first testing were very, very cool because we poured champagne all over the place and we were trying to catch it, and it was very playful. And we are talking about 0G flights, so it's basically 20 seconds of microgravity that you have to try to make everything happen in 20 seconds, which is often very messy. But we figured out a way to control the liquid. We still have some fine-tuning to do to make sure that every droplet stays within that massive champagne we release. But the key aspects, and this is why it's very technical, is how you release and you control the liquid, and how you are able to capture it with the specific tool, this glass of the space glass, if you may, and that in this case, if we are sharing, if we are able to serve, if we are able to clean glasses, to look at the wine, to drink it in a way your nose is able to take advantage and to not take advantage, to feel actually the structure of the wine, the aromas and everything, to enjoy actually the wine, not only just ingest alcohol, but enjoy a cultural ritual, then I, as a designer, have done my job well. You know, that's the requirements. The requirements is how that's what we set up as an experiment, as an experience. Sorry, as a user experience, and that this is what we want to provide. You know, and in order to do so, obviously there's, as I said, a lot of testing, but there's also a lot of fine-tuning, engineering, making sure everything can withstand the pressures that we are applying, plus margins. So we have extensive testing. We had to partner with CNES, as you mentioned, the French Space Agency, who saw also an opportunity to say that this is a typical French product, champagne, but also the way we talk about space and what we want to deploy in space from the French perspective is very interesting. We are focusing on how nutrition can go with gastronomy, how typically a project like Champagne can bring conviviality. So we want to, and this is an interesting thing from an agency point of view, the CNES is also defending that kind of savoir-faire, you know, that kind of that ability we have in France to convey conviviality through typical goods, and that's what makes actually our cultural identity. So they have accompanied us for a bit, and we are now, I would say, in the final months of having the bottle completely ready and ready to embark on an Axiom mission. So I don't want to jinx it and give you a date where it will fly, but if you keep posted, it should be soon. So in the coming year.
Can't wait. Can't wait, Octave. I got I got two questions, and they're totally in different directions, so you can decide which one you want to start answering. When they do the champagne, right? They put the cork on the bottle, and then the cork never comes off until they're ready to drink. For the purpose of your bottle, did you have to uncork and then rebottle within the design bottle, or did you use the cork that was already there in the design? So that's the first question. And then the other question is, in the olfactory experience, right? These molecules that we smell on Earth, right? In the champagne, they're triggered by the bubbles that come up. On the wine, we swirl the glass so that they can be released. When you're in zero gravity, the first of all, the liquid is contained, right? It doesn't spread anywhere. I don't know are the physics of these molecules, to smell. So how do you make sure that in zero gravity, when the liquid is open, that these molecules find their way to your nose? So those are the two questions. However you want to answer them, it's up to you.
Okay, a very interesting one, because the first one is about basically, well, it's about how champagne is made and how we can, up to a certain point, take some liberties, but we have to conform to the specifications of the Champagne region, which are among the toughest that exist on Earth. And as you mentioned, the Champagne elaboration process guarantees that it is made inside the bottle that the customer actually gets. So there's a first part that is made in a vat, and then the second part is made in the bottle. And it has an 18-month minimum resting time inside that bottle before being put to the market. And so that is the AOC, what we call AOC, which is the specification organism that guarantees that it's made within the regulations of the Champagne region. And you have some derogatory practice for very small bottle and very big bottle. So up to a certain amount per year per house, you can rebottle champagne that has been done in bottles or magnum, and you can rebottle them either in very big bottles or in half bottles, typically. And that was a design driver, because if we wanted to respect the regulation, we couldn't afford to have yeast for 3 years inside a good that is going to space, because you need to be very clean at every stage, specifically right before packing into the cargo patch. You have to be extremely clean. So this is made in this is all assembled in clean rooms, And so in order to guarantee that we don't have yeast and bacteria and that kind of stuff, and that we control exactly the composition of the liquid, we had to go to a derogatory filling procedure, which is the champagne is made inside the bottle. Then you uncork it, you put it through specific machines that guarantee that the pressure won't be lost, So basically it's a machine that transfers the liquid from one bottle to another. It's typically used for semi-bottles or for very large bottles. And it has to be done in Champagne region. So our hardware goes from Toulouse, where it's assembled, to Reims, where it's filled, and back to Toulouse, where it's finished to be assembled once the liquid is inside, once the champagne is inside. So we had to go through a derogatory mode, but that was one of the design drivers. So our bottle of champagne contains half a bottle. And half a bottle serves quite a lot of those champagne bubbles, we call them, but they are not bubbles because they are not hollow. But the way the champagne exits and the way liquid arrange themselves in zero gravity is that they will form a sphere, you know. And that sphere is, as I mentioned, is flying around. You catch it with a specific tool. And it actually, half a bottle serves quite a bit of those spheres, you know. So the experience for us, you don't need to get a ton of champagne. You know, the point of that experience is not to get smashed, obviously. It's more to enjoy a ritual that is very familiar um, for celebration on Earth, you know, and be able to enjoy in very specific, very rare occasions, but typically, I don't know, if you envision a trip to Mars, you know, that will last 1, 2, 3 years, you can imagine that there are those specific times where you need to release the pressure, where you need to celebrate something, where you need to actually, where that bottle of champagne can be a tool that enable the crew to relieve some pressure, to feel, to have that conviviality moment, you know. And so we see that bottle of champagne as a tool able to deploy a convivial experience that can be a necessity on those long term, on those long journeys. And back to that quantity of champagne. So we bottle half a bottle, which is 375 mils, and it serves up to 8, let's say 10 glasses, which is more than enough to serve a crew and to deploy that experience. But we still have a cork, and that cork doesn't play the exact same role that it does on wine, because on wine bottles the cork has a specific way of allowing exchange of oxygen at a certain rate, which allow the wine to age, but in the same time protects the wine for the first years, you know. So we can't say it's the exact same thing. So we sort of brought the cork as a cultural symbol of champagne. You know, you can't really call it champagne if you don't pop the cork. But it also serves as a secondary mean of tightness, of water tightness, and we need to have two means of water tightness in every direction when you look at the liquid. So we have actually a two-walled bottle. So when you look at the bottle and in a cross section, the bottle is made of metal, but inside that bottle, inside that first shell, you have a glass bottle. And this is also because of champagne regulation. So that's the only material that's allowed to preserve champagne. And needless to say, it's the worst material you can bring to space, and NASA is very, and rightfully, very tough on how you ensure that you don't get glass shards inside a space station. You can imagine that's typically a very bad thing that needs to be completely controlled. So that's part of the couple of years I was telling you that we are refining and making sure everything is perfectly safe. So we had to in a way, your question is very interesting because it tells something, an aspect of the project I often tell people is that we had to interlace two sets of specs that are very tough, the one coming from the Champagne region and the one coming from the safety regulations of NASA, and that are very opposite in the way in what they allow you to do and what they don't allow you to do. And part of the knowledge that had to be conveyed in that elaboration process, in that design process, was to make sure we are constantly respecting both those specifications and trying to find a way to navigate so that they are complementary, where in fact they are opposite, you know. And so you have that double wall, as I mentioned. So you have one wall of glass that contains the liquid and one wall of metal that protects in case of breakage, of leakage. You know, you have that second skin that is in metal. And if you look on the axis where the liquid will go, you have a valve mechanism that allows to control the champagne, as I said. So with your finger, you can pour, open, close, more or less, etc. And then you have that secondary mean that is mainly used during travel. So when the bottle is going up, which is the cork that you can pop. So it's not a useless decorative item. It's an item that is inherited from Earth and that we have slightly transformed so that it serves a purpose in the context of a space flight. So we don't lose the identity. And this exists in many objects around us, actually, that you have uses that have been lost, but in some way, objects often quote what they were in the past, I don't know, you can see it in your calculator of your iPhone, which looks exactly like a calculator with push buttons that was made in, I don't know, in Germany in the 80s or something like this, or the 60s. And you have so that idea that you have an inheritance of shapes that come from Earth and that are necessary for me, that are ways that you can actually quoting those objects is also what makes them familiar, and what makes them familiar is what makes them comfortable to use, to understand, and to perceive as home, actually, also in the context of a long duration flight. So that was for the first part. There is a cork, it pops, and it's part of the celebratory ritual, and it has a use. It's not just a gimmick. The second question is also very interesting because we've worked with sommeliers and enologists, that were trying to, and specialists of champagne that were trying to predict what will happen in zero gravity and how the bubbles are going to evolve and what direction they will take, and if they are going to form one giant bubble or go to the surface of that sphere, So we had a lot of blind guess before we started to fly the bottle. And what we realized is that it's actually, so in a perfect environment with no disturbance at all, it's not sure that the CO2 would escape the liquid. It would get a chance to not come to the surface. If you look at a champagne glass, what you see is often columns of bubbles, and what they are not coming from, they are often, it looks like they're coming from the wall of the glass. And they are not coming from the wall of the glass, obviously. It's CO2 that is dissolved in the liquid, and it's atomic imperfection on the surface of the glass that cause a disturbance in the liquid and the CO2 to form a bubble, a micro bubble that will then grow. So if you look at a column of bubble in a glass of champagne, they grow while they reach the surface because they gather CO2 that is dissolved on the way to the surface. Then they pop, and as you say, they are part of the way the aromas are released. But not only, actually, you have very volatile elements that are in every wine, and that will escape very fast in the beginning. And the more you go, the more you wait, the more the elements that are responsible for the aromas will effectively come to a point of pleasure and maturity that is the moment you want to drink the wine. And so we thought, how are they going to behave, and are we going to have a release of aromas? And what happened is that we know from Jean-François Clairvoy and from other astronauts we've partnered with in those discussions that the sense of smell is sort of inhibited or partly inhibited during a space flight. That is due to numerous factors, but also congestion of the I miss some specific terms, but the congestion of your mouth and nostrils, that will not perceive exactly, and we know from an astronaut perspective that you feel you have lost some taste when you are, and the ability to smell and to taste. And so we know that this takes the direction. On the other hand, when we try in 0G, most of the aromas, they don't escape, they don't fly away. They actually stick around, and you have a very overwhelming experience of champagne, sometimes too much for some people. So you don't have those aromas, that very volatile one that go away, that fly away, that are very, very light, and that when you when you get a glass of champagne that's very fresh and you put it straight under your nose, you will have a like a shot, a very intense set of aromas, but they are going to dissipate with sometimes, with the time. And in this case, they don't dissipate. They stick around. There is no reason why they would go away or fly upwards, because they are not lighter than air, because they are lighter, but there is no gravity that arrange the molecules vertically. So you have actually a quite intense set of aromas. And then when you drink it, the fact that the CO2, the bubbles, are not separated from the liquid, they are actually embedded in the liquid when we serve, because for the same principal reason, from Archimedes' perspective, there are the bubbles in a glass of champagne, they go up and they escape. And in a glass of champagne of space, they stick in the liquid and they form a sort of foam that is very thick, that is made actually of gas and of liquid. And what happens is when you put that in your mouth, you have a very, very sparkly experience. And you have all the taste buds that are smashed instantly with a ton of aromas. So most of the people, and specifically the professional people that have experienced that, because I'm a designer, I'm no professional wine taster, although I have quite a lot of experience now on this, but I'm always on the pleasure side of things. All those professionals, they said it's very overwhelming. It goes in your mouth in a very different way than it used to when you're on Earth, where you have the liquid that usually go on the bottom of your mouth. Now it goes and it stimulates all the taste buds that are on the upwards part of the mouth that are not very used to that. So it's quite an intense and pleasurable experience, actually. So in one very small glass, you get a very intense, very nice experience. All the people that I've tried it have defined it as something incredibly powerful, And you get also a very human, very, very, very interesting experience in terms of what you do, the fact that you have to catch the liquid, the fact that it's very playful. So it's I don't know, it's maybe a 5 to 10 minutes ritual that you can implement on a space flight, but it carries actually a lot of positive things for a crew, both in terms of taste, as I mentioned, because you capture, and in my opinion, a wine is an excellent testimony of Earth, because it's a testimony of the soil, it's a testimony of a method, it's a testimony of human culture, of heritage, it's a testimony of a weather, of a specific year, usually, of a specific region, even inside a region of a specific land. So it's an incredible, and you can conserve it for years, So it's a very nice reminder of Earth to be able to pack on a space flight, And when you open it, obviously you have all these aromas that are coming from Earth that are very natural, And on top of that, the experience that we've developed with that hardware, we call it, so the bottle, the glasses, and everything that we need to deploy that experience. This is also very, very interesting, very playful, very very different than what you are used to experience in space and in zero gravity.
So I was thinking there are a couple of questions that you answered. One of them was the bubbles, right? Because I knew that the bubbles on the glass they don't magically appear. There's actually these molecule imperfections or disturbance that where the CO2 attach itself. So how does it behave in a place where there's no glass? Are these imperfections are found are in the liquid? So when they come out, and also the distribution of the liquid on Earth, the part of the champagne experience is the pre-drinking, right? Unveiling the pop, whether you want to sablé the champagne. I mean, the part of the experience is really the unveiling of it. So you've answered that question because it's actually part of the the process even in 0 G. So it's really fascinating. But the other question that was in the back of my mind was, so you said that obviously glass, you don't want to bring that to space, but because of the 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 rules of the regulations, the rules of champagne, you need to have glass. So did you do a normal glass? Was it first you took the glass and then you covered it with steel or with metal, or you did the metal first and then you created a bottle inside? And if is there a point where in the future you could see the metal bottle with a very, very fine, tiny like layer of glass in the interior, just to uh, respect the regulations, but at the same time technology has allowed you to basically just create a film right inside the bottle, but not without having the really a thick glass.
Yeah, I think it's we are looking into that these technologies because they exist in you have um, companies that are creating layering vats, for example, with a thin layer of glass, and you have all the technology that is actually very ancient that we call enamel, that is actually pretty much a layer of glass, basically, that you can put on metal or you can put on clay, you know. So you have this enamel possibility. What happened is that we sort of needed a first vehicle, a first container that we could bring to Reims and that we could fill with champagne, in which we could use the transparency to control that everything is um, that we don't have any pollution inside the champagne. You know that's a process they actually do in champagne. You know, so we needed the transparency to make sure um, we are good with the regulations of champagne and we respect that. And what happened is that in the process, in the early stages of that bottle, it was only made of glass, you know. So the first prototypes we did were glass bottles because they were the only regulation we were trying to respect. And then as the project evolved and became a serious thing and CNES was involved, then we sort of took all the documentation that we need. And it's not uncommon to bring hazardous material into space. You know, you have very hazardous stuff that go into scientific experiments. You have glass that go in lenses, in cameras, and this kind of thing. So it's not uncommon to bring hazardous material. You just have rules that apply, you know, and depending on if you have pressure, if you have electricity, if you have chemicals, if you have so you have standards that define what are the ways to do that properly. And what happened is that we sort of took off from this bottle that we made in Champagne and that was able to and that was respecting actually, and that was the result of a negotiation with the regulatory board of Champagne, you know, and we shelled it so that it's conforming to those documentations, to those rules that apply when you calculate the pressure, the hazardous material, the criteria of hazardous of the champagne, because everything is perfectly. There is no uncertainty in this documentation process, so everything has to fit into a giant table that classifies all the risks, you know, and then you have countermeasures that you need to apply or testing that needs to be done or requirements that needs to be respected so that you can prove that you are way over. So you have margins of error and you are able to contain the risk, mitigate the risk. And the result, the bottle as it is today, is obviously the result of its birth inside the Champagne terroir and within those regulation and, as I mentioned, inheritance of their way to do stuff, and that we brought it along the way inside the logic and the design practice that you need to have to be able to conform safely to the regulation of a space flight. So this object is very hybrid right now, and it's probable that it continues to evolve in the future as we reach our goals. So the goal now is actually only to send it to space, to be able to send it into a human space flight, not in a cargo unmanned flight, but in a human space flight, to be able to witness, to send Champagne safely, you know. And once we have ticked that box, once we are sure we are able to do that, maybe we'll go back to the drawing board and try to see how we can make things better, because I can see myself working a couple of well, I don't want to jinx it, but I can see how the project will need to evolve, and how, as you mentioned, technology, and often technology that are used in other industries are providing a way to solve problems that we have in design, you know, in space, but also on Earth. So one thing after the other, we are now sending it to space, and once it's there, we'll probably have a discussion also with NASA, because obviously, as of today, it's not possible to drink alcohol in a space flight where astronauts are working, and we can completely understand why. You don't want to be impaired in your duty. We also know that there's a lot of wine and alcohol that has been drunk on space stations. You can find it. It's very well documented. It's no secret, but we can understand why the regulatory authority, so the NASA in this case, doesn't allow it for ISS astronauts. What we know also is that probably the set of rules is so these rules are set to evolve in the context of private players, in the context of astronauts that are not necessarily working. And what we say is that it's an interesting time we are living, because you have these private astronauts that will probably require activities that are off, or that are very different than what the workers, the astronaut that we know, so that the working astronauts do. So they will probably have more opportunities, and that could include festive activities, maybe different food experience, maybe alcohol consumption. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that we know also that there is an interest for those long duration flight, as I mentioned now several times, that in this context, alcohol is not as bad as we think, because if you are going two years and a half on a trip, on a working trip, and we know that from a lot of other experience, and even actually if you look at submariners or Arctic workers, you know, these guys, they go for a long time, and we're not at all talking about 2 years. It's usually less than a year, you know. We know that we need some time, specific time in those experience where they don't abide in the same set of rules that they do in their working hours, you know. And that is a very interesting perspective on how, as I said, a very small quantity of champagne can bring a lot of joy, a lot of relief, a lot of can allow to serve a product from Earth, you know, to people that are having a very hard time because they are distant to Earth, you know, and having a hard time, and that we know of as well. You have no astronaut experience that can tell you that they have had a constant good mood, you know. You have to address those concerns about the moral, about the psychological aspects of a long space flight, you know. And part of the way we can address that is try to, and we do that in very different way. We have other projects with CNES where we start to think what's the well-being of an astronaut, how you can entertain a well-being, a situation where they can keep the mood high, but also how you can address problems when the mood is very low, you know, and you need some sort of device or experience that can actually address those moments where you're off what was planned, in terms of psychological aspects. So this is a very interesting times, I think, for guys like me, agencies, design agencies, because we are trained to address those. We are trained to address what relationship with your environment, um, how to design objects and environments so that the relationship you have with your environment allow specifically for those allow actually harmonious and a good experience.
It's amazing everything that came into it, and congratulations, my hat to you and your team. And the which leads me to the something that I want to bring to the audience. But there's a documentary coming out called Alcohol in Space, where there are three different alcohol companies or teams, right? There's the beer one, there's the Scotch, and then there's you, and obviously where we find humans, we find alcohol. This is a ritual that has been, that is part of us. So as we go to space, we're gonna figure out what's gonna be the next step. So I understand the documentary is coming out soon, or has come out, or
Yeah,
we'll put the link. And I know it's with Chris and his book.
yeah, exactly. It's Chris that is behind this, and he was interviewing me, Chris Carberry, for in the beginning of the project. I don't know if he tracked down our project, and he was one of the first to reach out and to ask, why are you guys doing this, because he was doing a piece on broader culture in space, I'd say, and specifically on alcohol at that time. And it was very interesting having those conversations with him, because I was at the time where I thought I was alone doing all this, because obviously there was not much publicity about this in the design world, but in the space world as well, and in France in particular. He brought all this knowledge about what others are doing everywhere to try to bring culture into space, if we want to put it in simple words. And then came a team of filming, and we had a very good relationship with them. We gave them we grant access to everything we had filmed since day one, and we filmed a lot of things. So they have, I think they have pictures of me and videos and clips of me 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. So in the very early stages, even before I actually graduated. So. And I'm looking forward to actually discover the film. They've sent me a couple of working versions along the way, but I really am looking forward on how they interlace all those three stories, and how they are able to I think to give that message that you said it very well. Where we find human, we find culture and alcohol, actually. And this is true that along the way I met a lot of very interesting people, and when you discuss with archaeologists, for example, they will tell you that you can track back very far alcohol rituals, alcohol, or sometimes other ways to impair yourself, but in a group situation, and that alcohol has existed for now a very, very long time, and you have traces of those rituals where we group, we regroup, as the Greeks would do, and we drink wine together. And this is not something that is anecdotic on the history of mankind. This is something that this and dancing, I think, are two of the oldest rituals that we can track. So I think we are asking a right question here. We are not saying everyone should drink in space. We're saying there's a way humans are going to do that. An interesting anecdote, I don't know if I have the time, but in the early stage of the project, I talked with a submarine guy, and in the submarines, they have a policy of not allowing alcohol. And what happened is that they discovered that if they don't allow it at all, people smuggle it, and they tend to drink on their own. They tend to have lonely drinking, so bad drinking, if you want to put it in easy words. And what happens is that they get very low morale. They get sometimes accidents. They get fights. They get a lot of the negative aspects of alcohol because they don't allow it. And what they do now, in at least in French submarines, is that they, instead of completely prohibiting it, they've framed it so they said you have a specific quantity of alcohol that is allowed in specific times where you can release the pressure, where you can actually drink all together. And what they have learned about this is that when you allow it, and when you um, obviously you have some regulations, but you allow it in a convivial way. It's not like there's a specific quantity that everyone is allowed. There is a moment where it's okay to drink, and it has to stay reasonable. And when you do that, you have all the positive aspects of alcohol. You have people getting together, you have tensions that lower, you have um, fights that are avoided, actually, you have conflicts that are resolved. So it it also gave me um, a vision that if you don't allow it, you will get the worst. And if you do allow it, you might actually get what's important about this, which is the conviviality. It's not the substance, it's not the fact that you are impaired, it's the social ritual.
It's the ritual, and that's one of the big differences between Europe and America or North America when it comes to the relationship with alcohol. Right? The in Europe, wine is not considered a drug. It's part of the meal. Right? The bottle is on the table. You don't have an alien relationship with it. It's like don't touch it. You grew up understanding that this is just it's not a forbidden aspect or drink. And so if you take the forbidden legacy of it, then you don't have this kind of desire to always go for it and just like waiting for the time where you can go and you can finally taste it, and then all this repressed energy springs back up, and now you have like all the abuses that we often see in in the US or different places where it's a forbidden item, it's a forbidden fruit, and then when you get to that place where you can do it, then you overcompensate it as opposed to just growing with it, take away the stigma, and just having it enjoy and make it part of the ritual. And for me, this is I'm definitely more European than American in that, is that wine is a ritual of preparing dinner or meal. At the end of the day, you and I, we talked about that. But just before I let you go, Octave, just kind of question. So last time that we spoke, I did mention the movie Perfect Sense. Did you have a chance to watch
No,
it?
no, as I told you, I have a very little kid and I had the chance to watch zero movies since last time, but it's on my watch list. And but unfortunately, I get very little time off, and it's difficult to watch 2 hours movie right now. I'm not saying I'm not going to ever, but
Yes.
right now, I'm so my wife is a movie director, so we have a watch list that is getting bigger every day.
Yes.
But we are both on a tough spot right now where we try to get some sleep,
Yes.
actually.
Excellent.
But I
Well,
will watch it, that's for sure. Your
well,
pitch was perfect, and
just for the everything that we've talked about, the experience of food and how that experience changes as your senses change around you or disappear. And obviously, there's a story, but really, I think you will really connect with the philosophy and the thought process behind it. Octave, it's always fun to have our conversation because we really connect all in one conversation. The human experience, the food, the wine, the design, and
so
how
next time
we
we have to have a glass of wine.
absolutely. Well, we will be in Europe. I think in September, end of August to September. So I'll keep you posted. And in the meantime,
Are you
when
coming to IAC,
to where?
IAC Milan, the International Astronautical Congress?
When is it?
around that time. It's September, October. I think it's October.
I'll look it up. I'll look it up. I know that we're going to the south of France, the second part of August. I think 18th to 1st of September. So I will
Okay.
keep you posted.
Yeah,
But
let's connect and make sure we get an opportunity to finish that conversation around a glass of wine. Would be great.
absolutely, and I hope that Mumm will do a public version of it for the stores. I mean, it would be kind of a collectible to bring the public with it and join, you know, the science and the technology, but also, you know, something that is more accessible to the public and have something that is not, you know, the technological creation of it, but something that is kind of look-alike. I think, yeah, I hope they
Yeah, I
consider
think
it.
they're working on ways to share that process and that object
Yeah,
that is very complex, and as you mentioned, few people have witnessed it. So
yeah,
I think they're working on that on how to share that with the public.
that would be
Well,
great.
anyway, I'll keep you posted, Daniel. And
Excellent.
thanks again for having me.
Yep,
It was a great conversation again.
Octave, always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the evening and good luck with the sleeping.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. Have a good day. Bye.
You too.